Good night, kiddo.
Every good story has a structure. This narrative structure keeps consumers hooked, interested, and engaged. Usually, the structure is as follows. We are given the introduction, then the inciting incident, followed by the rising action, peaking at the climax, and finally slowing down with the resolution or the falling action. This is what most linear stories follow, as it attracts the most attention. The reason this structure is widely used is because when this structure is used correctly, the person following the story is able to maintain their retention at a higher level, and the interest in the story remains because this structure is easier to understand. So when this structure is broken, when a story starts to break away from following this, usually the average consumer loses focus and interest in the story. The flow of the piece feels broken and erratic to them, and leaves them feeling more confused and bored than engaged. The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that breaks this narrative structure, and this is a problem, because this break in structure is where many people left the game. This break caused many people to lose their retention, at least on their first playthrough. The Last of Us Part 2's story and leaks were already met with the most controversy of this console generation. This game suffered from major story leaks weeks before its release and was review bombed to death by fans of the first game. This caused a very negative stigma around the game before its release, further strengthening the controversy surrounding it. Die-hard fans of the first game lashed out at the developers and voice actors, sending death threats and abusing them. This behavior was absolutely disgusting, and people like this should find something better to do with their time than abuse developers over a fucking video game. Many people love this game, and equally as many despised it. It split the fan base completely in half. Personally, I love the story. I found it to be a phenomenal and profound piece of art. The messages, themes, characters, all resonated deeply with me as I played through it. This game left me deeply thinking about it for days after I finished. And the game itself left me really heavy. I enjoyed every moment of the game, and it left me broken and in shambles, as it should have done. Because that's what it was trying to accomplish. That's what it was going for, and it's a depressing game, but that was already confirmed. We knew what we were going to get when we played this game, and that's what I wanted, an emotionally taxing piece of art that had me almost completely hooked. But again, the narrative structure in this game causes a problem. The ideas were good, the themes were strong, the execution and the pacing felt off. Note, in this video, I will be speaking only about the narrative of the game, and somewhat ignoring the gameplay itself. Here's a linear overview of the first half of the story. If you already know this, skip to the number on screen now. At the end of the first game, Joel kills all the Fireflies when they're about to operate on Ellie because this operation is going to kill her. The doctor about to operate on Ellie is Jerry Anderson, the father of another character named Abby. After escaping the hospital with Ellie, Joel travels to Jackson to live with his brother Tommy. He explains to Tommy what he did there and decides to live his life in Jackson alongside Ellie. Ellie and Joel's relationship becomes strained as Ellie's survivor's guilt sets in. Her immunity to the cordyceps infection makes her guilty. She eventually travels back to St. Mary's Hospital in Utah to uncover what truly happened there. When she finds out what Joel did, she angrily cuts ties with him. However, as more time passes, she realizes that she's missing out on time with Joel, so she begins a reconciliation attempt. However, this is where Abby comes in. Jerry's death greatly affects Abby, so she travels to Jackson looking to get revenge on Joel. She eventually finds him the very day after Ellie and Joel attempt to rebuild their relationship and brutally ends his life in front of Ellie. Yikes. Ellie, who subconsciously collected information on the people who killed Joel, find out that they operate out of Seattle under a neo-military organization called the WLF. She leaves Jackson with Dina, her girlfriend, who is pregnant, in pursuit of Tommy, who left earlier to avenge his brother. She wants the same things as Tommy, so by chasing him down, she's essentially killing two birds with one stone. Ellie and Dina go through most of Abby's accomplices, killing all of them one by one on their way to Abby. She eventually learns that the people who killed Joel are members of the now defunct Fireflies, and wanting revenge on Joel for what he did in Utah. This doesn't change anything for her, as she already knows why he did what he did. On the way, she meets Jesse, another friend from Jackson, and the father of Dina's child, who chased after her, chasing after Tommy. Eventually, Dina gets too sick to continue as she is pregnant with Jesse's baby. They find Tommy, but not before killing Abby's pregnant friend, Mel, after which Ellie has a breakdown. With the four of them reunited, they decide to leave Seattle and head back to Jackson for Dina's health. Their attempt to leave is stopped, however, by Abby, who shows up after finding all of her friends dead. Abby kills Jesse and threatens Ellie at gunpoint, and this is where the first half of the story ends. Up till this point, we've played through Ellie's journey, eagerly awaiting the moment in which we reach Abby. We kill hundreds of WLF members and scars just to get to her. This rising action causes a massive buildup of adrenaline in the player, causing them to itch for the climax of the story, the big moment where Ellie finds and possibly kills Abby. Because that's what we set out to do, right? That's why Ellie left Jackson. That's why she's been fighting all of these people, to get to Abby and enact the revenge she so desperately wanted. This gradual rise to the climax creates tension and excitement in every player. We're rushing to this moment. We want Abby to pay for what she did to Joel, for how she tortured him and tortured us. But then we finally get to that confrontation between Abby and Ellie. Abby bursts into their hideout and kills Jesse instantly, so fast it's almost missable, and she points her gun at Ellie. This is it, the big moment, the showdown between these two that the last 10 to 15 hours of gameplay has been building towards. However, then the structure breaks. This isn't the climax, we're far from the end, this is just the intermission. The story is only halfway done. Now, we need to see the other side of the story. This was a very, very controversial choice made by the developers that takes effect just after Abby confronts Ellie. The entire second act of the game is based on this choice, which is the act of making the player play as Abby. The player is then dropped into Abby's shoes, following the events that happened with her after Jackson, at the same time as the 3 days we spent as Ellie, as well as giving us exposition on her life and why she did what she did. So the second half of the game are as follows. On the day Ellie arrived in Seattle, Abby's friend Owen went missing while fighting members of a religious cult known as the Seraphites, or the Scars. Abby sets out to find him but is captured and tortured by the Scars. As she is about to die, she is saved by two Seraphite children, Yara and Lev. They escape the Seraphite camp, but Yara is severely injured. Abby leaves them at a dock and finds Owen. However, she feels guilty for leaving them alone and goes back to find them, as they are being chased by the Seraphites for betraying their people. Abby displaces the Seraphites and takes Yara and Lev back to Owen, who is now with Mel, and Mel says that they need supplies from a WLF base set up in a hospital to help fix Yara's arm. Abby and Lev quickly travel between skyscrapers to cover the distance to the hospital, as Yara's condition is critical. They reach the hospital and Abby gets the supplies, but she is now considered a traitor by the WLF for ignoring orders. She escapes and heads back to Owen, but Lev goes back to the Seraphite island to convince his mother to come with them. But she refuses and it begins to attack Lev. This causes Lev to fight back, killing her in the process. They attempt to leave the island but are countered by WLF forces who had begun an attack on the island to assert dominance over Seattle. Yara sacrifices herself so that Abby and Lev can escape. They leave the island and head back to Owen and Mel, but Abby finds them dead. She finds a map that Ellie left behind, which leads her straight to their hideout, and as we go inside, we are forced to fight Ellie. After almost killing her and Dina, Lev stops Abby, and they leave Seattle in search of more Fireflies. I'm obviously skipping over some smaller details just for time's sake, but that's the gist of it. I'm not going to talk about the choice of playing as Abby or her character in this video. I'm also not going to talk about the violence or anything. I'll save that for later videos. I'm just going to talk about the structure and why this shift from this sudden drop in the build-up affects the game negatively. The narrative structure in the game breaks much of the player's immersion. When we're engaged in a story, it matters that the story stays consistent, engaging, and entertaining throughout its entirety, while still staying believable. If this doesn't happen, the effect of the story is weak. The messages that the game is trying to send lose their way because the player just doesn't care anymore. There's no engagement from the player because they just don't give a shit. While playing as Ellie, we're given a typical structure. The world is introduced through Joel's interaction with Tommy, the conflict is presented by the inciting incident with Joel's death, and the rising action is present through Ellie's journey through Seattle. The tension is steadily creating the perfect atmosphere for a huge climax. We're reaching the part of the story where shit's about to go down, and it feels like everything's been leading up to this moment. But we aren't given that moment. That moment just isn't there. Instead, we're dropped into another 10 hours of gameplay as Abby, which feels like a separate full-length game in all honesty. This didn't resonate with most, and is where most players left because they didn't resonate with Abby as a protagonist. This was one big issue. People had no connection with Abby. There was no relationship built with her, no love for her because we didn't know her, and she killed the most beloved character in the franchise. So what, we're supposed to just play as her and like her as a character? Just ignore everything she's done? Most people didn't. We've gone through a massive trek to get to where Abby is, to find her and kill her. This rising action is building the player's adrenaline, but it suddenly just drops dead when we're made to play as Abby for a few more hours. It loses its punch because the climax we were itching for never comes. Instead, we're given 2 campaigns in one, each with its own intro, inciting incident, and rising action, and the climax is simultaneous between both of them at the end of the game. This understandably disrupts the flow of gameplay as well as the immersion that the devs wanted to get out of the player. The structure comes off as very broken and disjointed. We're presented with 2 lengthy stories, 2 separate arcs, 2 separate flows, and while non-linear storytelling has existed, it has been done well. This doesn't feel that strong because we're just dropped in the middle of a large arc, a large rising action and it feels empty at the end of it. It just feels empty. Ignoring a climax for an additional 10 hours leaves the player feeling uninterested because their previous interest was banking on the enormous build-up created in Ellie's journey. Then the resolution isn't present, so we feel empty. Honestly, there are a lot of options present, but I want to hear your thoughts on what could have been done, so leave some comments on what you think would have worked better. I'll put forward one idea of my own. I would have preferred if this game was marketed as one without Ellie and Joel, but revealed to us later on that they're a part of it. Imagine if it was marketed as a story in the Last of Us universe, but not related to Ellie and Joel. We go on a journey with Abby, a story of a broken person finding love in a young companion who teaches them how to feel a human again. Sounds eerily familiar to another game released in 2013, don't you think? Donkey said it first. We're given the chance to learn to love Abby, and I personally did love Abby's character. So, if we're given this chance, we grow to love her as a character and build connections with her. And then bam, it's revealed that she killed Joel and Ellie is chasing after her. Then Ellie becomes the villain, yet a villain we sympathize with, a villain we love. It shifts the dynamic because we learn to love Abby, but then we realize her connection with Joel and Ellie, 2 other characters we love, and it shifts the whole dynamic and reactions of players. This results in only 1 climax and only 1 campaign rather than 2, and we can get subtle hints of exposition through flashbacks, etc. Of course, I'm missing out on a lot of what the story held, but if this idea is taken and fleshed out, it would be very, very interesting to see what could have been accomplished and how much more it could have resonated with players. I love this game. I really do. No dick sucking of Naughty Dog. I just genuinely liked what they did, but it's because I love it that I can understand why people don't. I disagree with the people who are like, this game fucking sucks and you can't change my mind, but I also disagree with the people who say this game is the best and you can't change my mind. It's better to accept the flaws in the things you love and explore them. Just like the people in the story, it's not really as polar as it seems. There's a plethora of opinions on this game, and it's better to be open-minded and explore these thoughts and talk about these flaws rather than be stuck in one mindset and never change. This game isn't black and white. The people in it aren't black and white. And if you don't change, and if you don't understand that, if you don't evolve with the times, everything is going to move on without you, and that's a very scary thought. I love this game, but I understand that it has flaws, and a lot of things could have been improved. I understand and embrace every aspect of it. Oh, and if you hate the story because of the inclusion of LGBTQ plus characters or female leads or any of that backwards bullshit, just grow the fuck up, dude. Well, that's all I have to say for this video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Again, I'm still learning this YouTube stuff, so if I ramble a bit, forgive me. If you'd like to keep up with me, my socials are linked below, or you could join my Discord server to make everything easier. Consider subscribing if you're new and click the notification bell so that you never miss my uploads. Thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to look for the light, and goodbye for now.